Welcome to Fields of Consciousness, a podcast for consciousness conversations with your hosts, myself, Jeffrey Stegman.
And I'm Clayton Stedman.
As consciousness explorers and founders of Focus Life Force Energy, we're here to bring a holistic approach to consciousness and to share practical examples of how you can take your life to the next level.
This is a multi-part series, and we have a very special guest, psychologist, master researcher, and our friend, Gary Schwartz. Celebrate with us this conversation on synchronicities and what they can mean for your life.
So, Gary, how does our consciousness, our intentions affect this? I mean, so we're having this, you could say external, we know that if there's consciousness underpinning everything, and it's one mind and we're just an expression of that. But, here we are thinking of something and then these synchronicities show up. So there's this intention, or I know in your book you talked about times when you were really sort of passionately asking the universe for an answer. So that there's this thought, and then there's the kind of strong thought out there affecting, and then the answer back is this amazing coordination in time and space of these signs or these synchronicities.
Jeff, that's one of the deepest and most profound questions. And the one that I have, it's one of the, I would say maybe top 3 or 4 questions that I have struggled with as someone who ultimately considers himself to be a conservative scientist, in the sense that I require evidence before reaching a conclusion. And I say conservative because I require a lot of data, particularly. And the more controversial or the more novel or the more important the question and its potential interpretation, the more data that I require. And my hunch is that the universe, gets back to the staircase of explanations that we'll address in a bit, is that to the extent that this ultimately involves the active collaboration of a universal one mind, divine mind, then it's going to appreciate the genuineness of my desire for certainty of evidence. And therefore, it will put up with my saying, I need more evidence before I can reach a conclusion about this. In other words, it forgives me for my need for data. Like I think it forgives you and Clayton for you're putting numbers on everything and checking things and being as careful as you are, which is something I admire. Okay. Consciousness plays multiple roles. So what I'll do now is give you my conclusions based on 30 plus years of collecting all these data and writing this paper and book and giving talks about this and stuff. And then we can question, well, how did I reach these conclusions? Number one is that synchronicity, one aspect of your consciousness is you have to be able to notice it. You have to be able to see it. As Jung said, synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. And the key is to have eyes to see means, first of all, you have to have the physical capability to be able to sense something. And I recently, because I was losing sight due to cataracts, and then it was the miracle science and surgery of contemporary cataract surgery gave me visual, literal vision that is greater than I've had since I was a child. If you can't see something, then you can't go further with it. And so it's sort of like if you want to see a yellow bird, you have to be willing to look for birds. You have to be open to seeing birds. You have to be where the birds are. If you're going to be a bird watcher, you have to have an intention to watch birds. That doesn't mean to say that you can't be not looking and have a surprise occur, but you have to be willing to see the surprise, and you have to know that it's there. So there's the intention to look. There's the intention to notice. Then there is the question of the extent to which you are requesting information and requesting it for what purpose. It has been my sense that that people who experience more synchronicities are not only open to seeing synchronicity and are even on the lookout for synchronicity, but their purposes are genuine, and they're not like malevolent, and they're not, quote, selfish per se. What I mean by selfish is that it's as if the universe wishes to gift us these events. The more that not only do we have a genuine need for it, but they won't be wasted. And the extent to which they're a gift, not to you, just to you, but in turn, your ability to be of service to others, you then are more likely to receive them. And also, I think, curiously involve other people in their gathering. Because my experience is also that the more frequent these synchronicities are, typically involves more people. And there are levels of meaning or relevance to people directly or indirectly. So, for example, if somebody brings up a moment like, let's take soup, why did I overtly ask about that? I didn't simply ask about this because I was curious myself to track it as a synchronicity, although I was. I shared it in part because I thought it would make you and Jeff and the others who are part of this call smile. And I thought it would it could be potentially useful in the service of the greater intention of this moment, this special podcast on St. Patrick's Day, and quote, luck, and so to the extent that your intention is not just for self, but for others and for the higher and greater good, my experience has been the more, therefore, frequently they are provided. And I say this because I then generalize to other people I know who live their lives like that and who also are blessed, like, Rhonda and I are, and you guys are, to experience synchronicities at the level that you do. I also, sometimes we have an important decision to make, and again, that decision doesn't affect just us, but it affects our loved ones. It may affect a business. It may affect other people that we care about, and so on. And you're concerned about those multiple. You have a conscious awareness of that, so you seek guidance for that. The way I explain it to people, because I'm very cautious about drawing a specific conclusion about synchronicities unless I have enough of them, and then the meaning has become sufficiently clear that I can feel comfortable making an inference. And again, I approach this, conservatively. And the way I summarize it is as follows: I never make a decision, an important decision, because of synchronicities. Meaning, if something happens and there's synchronicity and there's a lot of synchronicities, I don't immediately just think, well, that's a sign for X, and therefore I should follow those events. I've learned that lesson. I'm very careful about that. On the other hand, I never make an important decision unless it's accompanied by independently confirmatory synchronicities. So in other words, if I am making a decision and then there are synchronicities that support that choice versus other choices, then I'm more likely to make that decision, and that's often more often been confirmed. So our consciousness and our intention is, I think, it's a co-creative process, but it's not like that my mind makes the yellow car appear or my mind makes you think about soup or whatever. But my intentions and my and which includes what I'm going to do with it, I think is very meaningfully related to the extent to which the universe nourishes us with these gifts.
And is your assumption along with that, Gary, or where would you put the level of consciousness of the person looking for synchronicities in that formula? Would you infer that a higher level of consciousness person would either co-create or recognize more synchronicities?
Okay, it's a great hypothesis. By the way, I really prefer being the interviewer than the interviewee. Just for the record, I would much rather be asking you guys questions.
Well, you don't have to answer
Sitting back.
that.
I do. No, you
Yes.
deserve it. It deserves an answer, and you deserve an answer, and the audience deserves to hear, I think, my reflection on that. I'm just sharing with you that I would rather.
Yes,
you guys opinions about this. Get myself straight. Okay. But having said that, since you did ask me to be a guest in the show and not an interviewer on the show,
I'm not sure I understand.
I'm not sure I understand. Somebody, either Siri or somebody else, just spoke to me, which is very odd. Sorry, I wasn't asking you. Okay, at least I wasn't consciously asking you. Based on my understanding of levels of consciousness, conscious awareness, and consciousness field, and so on, I would be forced to entertain the hypothesis that all things being equal, people who develop higher consciousness capability, awareness, higher consciousness fields, that literally almost like a side effect of that higher consciousness is to become more aware of synchronicity and connection, to be more likely to receive such events, to be more likely to celebrate such events, be grateful for such events, and so on. Yes, I think that's part of the, quote, spiritual wealth that comes with the developing a higher level of consciousness.
I think it matches up with what you said, Gary, about kind of noticing that people that are on a benevolent serving path, serving others path, seem more likely to experience in that. And that's I guess, a characteristic of certain levels of consciousness to have that.
Yes.
So a higher level of consciousness. And then it also reminds me of Dr. David Hawkins' theories around consciousness, that each point upwards on the scale has 10 times more power, 10 times more energy. So it's almost like there's a loud, like turning up the speaker, and like the higher you go, you're at an 8, then you're at a 9, you're at a 10. You're speaking to the universe or to the divinity with more power, perhaps. I mean, I'm just throwing this out there as an idea.
Right, and that's what conditional probability does too, because it constantly multiplies the improbability, and therefore it's significant. That's a very interesting kind of parallel. Some people, particularly skeptics or people, people who are highly questionable of this, they they think, well, it's just that nice people or kind people, they're just more open, or they just look more,
Mhm.
and therefore they see more. Um,
Mhm.
and that is a hypothesis you have to rule out, i.e., there has to be more evidence than just looking.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
not an open to looking. The events really have to happen. So this is a real phenomena. It's literally an increase in a probability this would happen by chance. Or putting it another way, it's an
Mhm.
increased probability that this will be happening above chance.
Mhm.
It's a real phenomena, not just one that you are aware of
Mhm.
because you're looking.
And you could say it's divinity speaking to us in math, right? I mean, like, okay, this is so, improbable probability of this occurring, that it's a nonlinear event. And I saw that in your book. And I like that, since, we call FLFE a nonlinear service,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
that, this is occurring, and the math is speaking to us. If you pay attention to the probability times probability times probability of all six things occurring, that it's such a huge number that it couldn't happen by chance. So there's that speaking to us about the importance of it. Then and I'm not even, my mind. It's just completely mind bending to me that we have our intention. We're asking for help. The reality gets bent into time and space, into this, say it's, six yellow cars um, showing up in this short amount of time for us. And then it's saying something to us. It's like the importance of that, like paying attention to that, to this way of being communicated to. It's so incredibly complex, that orchestration of that. I'm just kind of in the awe of that right now.
Yes. And the awe only gets worse or greater the deeper you appreciate it, and the more that you actually experience the events. As I was listening to you, and not only are the parallels striking, to put it mildly, which is probably the reason why the two of you felt that this was an appropriate podcast, and on a special day, and that maybe I could contribute to this in some way. But it also addresses the question of, well, if God is speaking to us, why is God being so obtuse? I mean, why doesn't God give us a simple, do this, or here's the answer, or whatever? And I should say that, and I'm more than willing to confess this, I first shared it in a book I wrote in 2006 called The GOD Experiments. GOD stands for Guiding, Organizing, Designing Process, with a subtitle is how science is discovering God and everything, including us. During the same period of time that I first stumbled upon super synchronicity, starting with the number 11, was the first time that I ever asked the universe a question. I called it asking the universe a question in the middle of the night, and received I asked a specific question. I received a very specific answer. And then, to my quote, dismay, discovered that it actually had deep meaning, and it was highly evidential that supporting the phrase, be careful for what you ask for. By the way, I was so frightened by the implications that the universe could actually respond to requests that I didn't ask another question of the universe for over 10 years. I mean, it was because it was very, controversial, to put it mildly. Anyway, and now I do this quite regularly. And I can very often, I can ask a question in the middle of the night, when I'm away in a state of what I call non-sensory awareness. And an answer will, quote, pop into my head, which turns out to be, highly, quote, evidential and meaningful and practical, that I never consciously would have, I talk about outside the box. I'm way outside the box. But why, on the one hand, and these are questions that I have, but I can't answer you right now. Why, on the one hand, if I ask a question of the universe under certain circumstances, can I receive a direct answer? And under the other circumstances, it's like a breadcrumb universe. That's what Rhonda calls it, where you're following the crumbs step by step, and if the universe says, "Yeah, I don't have it yet. I'm going to give you this one," but it doesn't. It's sort of like it stays anonymous. And it leaves the decision to us, and it requires that we rise and elevate our consciousness and understanding to it. It's not, quote, spoiling us in that sense, nor is it, quote, just giving us the answers. We have to come to understand them. We have to work to receive them. Why is that effort? Now, I've come to the conclusion that it's a very deliberate and active and loving intention on the part of divinity, and that it serves a higher purpose, and that I should become peaceful with that. Which means part of that means that I remain comfortable being mystified, and we'll say the answer will come when the time's right, and so on. But on the other hand, it also says that that there can be very deep meaning, and it doesn't. You've heard the phrase "throwing pearls to swine." That you don't want to. You want to give people information who are ready to receive it and who also won't abuse it and will potentially celebrate it. So I want to get back to the question of 11. Yellow. Why all this yellow? Why all this yellow gold? Why now? Is there just one purpose for me personally, or Rhonda and I purposely? Or are there layers of meaning, and that there are both lower meanings and higher meanings, and they're all, talk about awe-inspiring, they're all built into the one message. And it's our challenge to be able to see and appreciate the higher levels. And then the question is, are we brave enough to accept them? And one of the things that I've come to over the past couple of weeks, and FLFE is right in the middle of this, is that what the universe could be saying to me is, Gary, don't forget yellow. The yellow and the yellow gold is significant for its light reasons, its energy reasons, its spiritual reasons, and we want this to be highlighted in your life. We want you to stay on the metaphor of the yellow brick road path, but on the yellow gold. That anything that you do that embedded in yellow and gold, both at a material level and a spiritual level, is information that's going to that people must remain, that they must learn, and then once they've learned it, not disconnect from. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I think you're reading between the lines, and both of you are seeing this.
Yes.
And we see this in all kinds of, once you start being open to that idea, that there's something spelled, you see it in ancient religious relics. You see it in the halos around the saints. You see it in the gold connected to Jesus. You see it in there's a vast array of historical representations and replications. You see it in people's associations to, yellow. People experience yellow. They experience joy. They experience sunshine. They experience hope. They experience peace. They experience energy. They experience love. Yellow is a very, special color. Most people would prefer to be on a sunny day than a cloudy day. Okay. I mean, and there's a reason for that. And wouldn't it be amazing if that's also embedded into healing, and it's embedded into the evolution of us being a peaceful species and being more focused in the yellow frequencies, at least for certain, and white frequencies. So I've said enough. Go ahead.
So Gary, have we ever talked to you about where the yellow in the logo comes from?
No.
So intuitives looking at the FLFE environment see a yellow gold color.
Really?
Is that right, Clayton?
Yeah, that's been I'm just remembering one of them. There was a lady who worked at a She was in training to be a biologist, and they were doing. They had to do. They had to dissect frogs and things as part of their training, and she felt bad about that, and so she ended up putting the service on the building. And then she noticed that there's this yellow energy around things. And I've only seen it a few times. One of the few times I've seen it is when we had a piece of the FLFE machine on top of my fridge at an apartment I lived in. Every once in a while I would see it come out. So I think it's something about the way the fridge interacted with the machine. At least that's my assumption, because that's the only time I've ever seen it.
Well, it's rare for people to see energy.
Mm-hmm.
And also, for the record, there's very few empirical research to see, but there's even interreliability among certain, energy being associated with certain materials or certain people or certain emotions and so on. But having said that, proviso, the fact is that, okay, let me frame it as a question. What does it mean to the two of you that yellow is seen around at the FLFE environment, and that you have also chosen it to be the symbol, the icon for FLFE?
When we prayed about, we spent a lot of time in what is your will for us, Lord? The what is your will for us, Lord space. How would you like this logo to look, God? And we just got shown what it was. That's how it worked. And we probably had, at least half a dozen people, anonymously, unsolicited, tell us, "Oh, I've seen it, and it was this yellow sepia tone, goldish color, the FLFE service." So that has, we haven't documented it in the way that you probably would have, but it just happened over the years.
Right. But does it have deeper meaning now? Does it, for example, I know you have an interest in services that relate to gold or so on, or anything that you could share, comfortably share publicly that speak to the, why a golden yellow light?
I think, for me, the gold is such a warmth, and so the sun comes to mind. And what's in my readings lately about the relationship between the sun and the earth and our personal evolution, that there's this connection of evolution and information in the light, so there's this connection to light and the sun for me, and the yellow color. That's the meaning for me, and that it's almost the color of evolution, or the color of I don't know, divine light, or divine light / information coming into us. So that's what comes to mind for me and around yellow and FLFE.
I can't say I have any other correlation to it. I haven't thought about it from that perspective. It's in terms of the sepia toned, almost opaque. It's like when you're looking through a piece of opaque glass and you can't quite see through it. There's a quality to that, or it's like a sunset where it's or a sunrise where there's everything is covered in yellow, like the golden hour they call it in photography. So I haven't thought about much more.
Okay, this is very important, and I hope that your podcast listeners can appreciate sort of the evolutionary path that all of us are on. That we're all students in all of this. No matter where we are in our histories, we're and collectively we're on a journey together. When I gave a talk to the Society for Psychical Research, coincidentally, 8 days ago, on synchronicity, they asked me to speak about this. The Society for Psychical Research was founded in England over 100 years ago, and it is the premier organization devoted to survival of consciousness after physical death and other kinds of spiritual science coming from the scientific world. And I decided at the last minute, because of this flurry of the yellow synchronicities, that I would use it as an example of contemporary, that is real time right now, super synchronicities occurring. And but I didn't have any. This was, of course, delivered. What we're talking about only 8 days ago, if I remember correctly. Anyway, I had very little clarity about, quote, what it meant. And one of the people in the audience during the question and answer period, audience meaning the virtual audience, said, "Well, gee, Gary, does the color yellow mean anything to you? What does it bring to your mind when you think of yellow?" I never really thought about yellow. At least I thought I didn't think about yellow. And then I was reminded that a basic science question that mystifies me still to this day, and that I'm dealing with on the question about the relationship between consciousness and the brain, has to do with the fact that we know that there really is something called yellow. Lemons in the world look yellow to us. And we know the sun looks yellow to us. And yellow finches look yellow to us. They really look yellow. But on RGB computers, like we're all looking at computer screens, there is no yellow frequency. There are only three LED, there are only three frequencies that are being generated by pixels: red, green, and blue. It's called RGB. And what happens is, when the red light and the green light occur simultaneously, we don't see brown, which is what happens when you mix paint, for example, or whatever. We see yellow. We see bright yellow. So somehow, and our eyes are the same way. That's why there's this mirror image between the receptors in our eye, the three types of colored receptors in our eyes, and the three types of lights. It makes it much easier to express the vast spectrum of colors if you could just use three frequencies of light and then mix them like a soup. So yellow is a soup frequency. It's an emergent property, okay, of red and green, where neither one of them by themselves, make, you would never guess they would make yellow any more than hydrogen and oxygen by themselves would mix and make water. Okay, it's called an emergent property in systems terms. So I have been pondering, how did divinity come up with the idea of mixing these three colors? Because if we're talking about an infinite intelligence, infinitely loving, infinitely intelligent mind, grand mind, and it is the, quote, creator of everything, including us. And yes, we are, quote, co-creators with it, but we're within it. We're a subset of it. It's not outside us. It's in and outside everything. How did it come up with that idea? And what's that telling us about its mind? And also maybe something, now I'm free associating, about missing what happens when you miss the real thing as opposed to just the representational thing. That we need yellow in our lives. And maybe we need that. The map is not the territory.
I have an
and
idea.
We get lost in the map and not the territory. And we need the territory. Go ahead. Yes.
Well, the idea of yellow being an emergent color.
Yes.
From red and green, as you said, I mean, it reminds me of our evolutionary path that we're all on, circling back to what we just said, that it's emergent. And we talk about a high consciousness zone being an emergent zone. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
No. Where
things are emerging sort of unbidden, or truths become self-evident that weren't evident before. So that emergent quality seems to be, the evolutionary path that we're on. And, back, kind of circling further back to why are synchronicities there instead of just the answer, it's honoring our free will as this piece of divinity that's evolving, and that we're discovering these things, and they're emerging for us step by step as we go through this evolutionary process.
So there are deep meta parallels. So the yellow lesson, the lesson of the yellow could be, as you said, multi-layered. And I think the one that I don't want to lose is to get lost in the meta lesson, or lost in just, I call it the little Gary. It's okay to buy this car if you want, because it's, it'll make you smile, and around the smile, it'll keep you on the path. And, and we want to be happy, and you can afford it and all this stuff. But it wasn't just that, but that there was some middle ground here to the work, not just the work, but the ways in which we know divinity. In other words, and the higher forms of divinity. Why is it that Jesus is typically seen and embedded in a golden yellow white light? I mean, why is it that and that could be that there's some deep significance to that, but unless we ask the question, right, we won't even know the answer. And I think the universe is sort of gently but firmly hitting me over the head, saying, "Gary, look, you've got the people to talk to. You've got Clayton and Jeff. You got people there who are doing this work. That this is the perfect group to raise these kinds of questions with."
Well, I can't imagine I guess I could imagine theoretically that the energy source of the solar system and the energy source of other solar systems, from what I understand about the nature of suns, that they are yellow. Like that's so. This is an interesting conversation, because this is what happens, Gary, when we start to hypothesize this. There's this. You put your science hat on and you take the possibility or the hypothesis that one of us presents, and you seem to be gracious enough to let us be human, but not allow us to transcend or ignore the scientific process. So from the scientific point of view, how would you entertain the hypothesis that this universal basic life energy that is similar to, say, we call it life force energy, some people call it prana chi, is there a reasonable correlation between assuming that, because the sun is the source of life in the solar systems that certainly I'm aware of, and I'm not an astronomer, or that isn't my specialty, what are the odds that the sun is yellow, and we're talking about yellow and associating with divinity? It just seems to be pretty coincidental.
I agree. Completely agree. Also, I heard, and again, you weren't being intentional about this, and Rhonda and I jokingly refer to these as almost synchronicities or stretches.
Yes.
But just like you said, super, and we were talking about soup. Okay. You said solar, and I was thinking about solar energy as SOUL. AR. A solar system and a solar system and a source system. My hunch is that it's not a coincidence of these things, and that even if we don't, quote, fully understand them or even partially understand them, that doesn't mean we can't recognize the confluence and act upon them. And not forget them, because it may be that this yellow golden frequency, even to the point where we're not going to lose it just with a subset of receptors. That's how much the divine doesn't want us to forget yellow. It could be that that's something that's going to be relevant to the evolution of the technology and our use of the technology in FLFE, in that there's going to be this enhanced understanding, and that golden yellow is going to be, I'm going to say, as you said, central and maybe evolutionarily fundamental. But if we don't entertain the hypothesis, we'll never make the discovery. We'll never, find out whether it's quote correct or not.
I'm just trying to enter into the conversation, or participate in the conversation, respecting the scientific process that a person like you would apply to the rigor of exploring this, and still allow ourselves to have, to be human and to have fun talking about it.
Let's put it this way. The gems, the diamonds, the gold are precisely those moments that come through the lips and vocal cords of a Clayton or a Jeff. And then we boring scientists who have these backgrounds, we can plod along and see whether we can, help them, nourish them. It's again, hydrogen and oxygen make water. It's the whole's greater than the sum of its parts. And some of us have more quote skills than the other, but one can't replace the other. Hydrogen can't make water by itself, and neither can oxygen. And a scientist like me, quote, can't do much without the intuitive people that I am blessed to have the privilege to be of service to.
Yes, there was one thing I didn't use in the soup metaphor, and I think that it's I don't know if it's the ladle, but I see you as a spiritual devotee disguised as a scientist. And maybe the ladle is your spiritual devotion. So every time you take the soup out of the bowl to be served, or the soup is taken out of the bowl to be served, the ladle would be your underlying spiritual premise to life, given that the soup cannot be served without the hand of God lifting the ladle, or something to that effect.
So I'm a synchronicity guru ladle. By the way, when I was at Yale many years ago, it really was many years ago now, over almost 40 years, I realized after I had my, quote, beginnings of spiritual awakenings, because I remember I was an atheist, I was a mainstream Western trained person who had virtually no paranormal or other synchronicities I was aware of at the time. Since then, I've learned I've had a few, but I couldn't place them in any context. I realized that what I was becoming, and of course I couldn't tell anyone, was that I was becoming an empirical mystic, an evidence-based mystic or spiritual person, what the Christians would call a Gnostic, and the Kabbalists, called whatever they called them. And that I was in that same, but I had no experience in it. I had no training in it. I didn't have there were no groups that I had been, and so I always consider myself to be an infant, who needs a spoon to be fed the soup so that I can be growing. But I think that in my heart of hearts, I'm like a lot of the people that you're surrounded by and you guys serve. And I think that's also probably characteristic of many of the customers of FLFE, is that they're here as much for the community of like-minded, like-hearted, like spiritual person, regardless of their education or their training or their personal circumstances. And again, that's part of the reason why a science-minded person like me can feel so at home bringing these tools to the mission that you're serving.
And talking about tools, and so we're, if this amazing information is there for us, and then there's something about the awe that it produces of seeing the complexity come together in these formations is like a celebration of the universe, the entire complexity of creation. It seems that these synchronicity clusters are like that, and they, like you said, they seem to come in waves, sometimes in up and down. But what might be helpful is to go through some of the techniques that you've used, like as this tool of synchronicities, of observing and understanding them. Like, how do you go about it so that the FLFE community can, learn from your knowledge and the way that you go about noticing them and seeing them?
That's a really good question. I have a section in the Super Synchronicity book where I sort of lay out a number of these steps quite explicitly. But the truth is, unless I review them or make a slide of them, I can't give a comprehensive list. But I can share some of the most salient ones that I personally use. And that is, first and foremost, I acknowledge I would have to say I acknowledge the reality that these exist. I accept Jung's phrase, synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. So I put the responsibility back on me. No one's going to find a synchronicity for me. Only I can find the synchronicity. Only we can find the synchronicities for ourselves. Other people can bring us synchronicities, particularly if they know we're looking for them, or they know we have an interest in something, or they'll have a moment that they're not aware of it, but they're bringing it. They're being unconscious, puppets of God. Ron refers to herself as a puppet of God, but she's very willing to be such a puppet. So I think the first thing is that if I put on my conservative scientist hat, I'm open to the possibility of synchronicity. If I say what I really now, based on all the experience that I've had, is I accept that they're real, and I accept that it's my responsibility to be open to them. Secondly, I try to always make time for them. And what I mean by make time for them, if I'm, for example, watching television, and I was trying to think of one that happened last night, and there was one that was really, I can't remember it right now. Anyway, all of a sudden, I'll see a TV show that's on. That's exactly what I was working on and doing. And the probability of my working on it is extremely tiny, and the probability of seeing it on television is good. So I notice an improbability. I take a photograph of it. I record it. Because if I don't record it, it's forgotten. So I note it when it happens. I make an active effort to say thank you, universe, and I also say gratitude. I say thank you, universe. And one of the ways I honor the presence of the pairing is by photographing it or writing notes about it or whatever, and then also celebrating it right at the bat, right at the thing. The next thing that I will do is that I will, and I will record them as best I can, given the fact that I live in the physical world and I've got a busy life. And sometimes when I'm flooded with synchronicity, it's sort of like I have to stop my life just to keep the record straight, and I can't typically do that. So, but I do make time. Like you have to make time to exercise, or we have to make time to meditate, or whatever. There are certain things you have to make time for. You have to make time for processing them, digesting them, because otherwise you forget them. And of course, the more you have, the more you're going to forget, because you can only keep track of so many things. There was a time when I wrote every time that a super synchronicity occurred, whether it made any sense or not, I wrote myself an email listing the events and put it in a special Gmail account devoted entirely just to keeping track of synchronicities. And I have over 100 of them there. And after a while, I quote, stop, because I didn't have time to review them. I didn't have time to look at them, and so on. But I didn't do it that religiously. I mean, I wish I could. But when anything salient occurs, yellow notes of paper, or in my iPhone, I have in the quote note section, I will make a listing. So there's this notion of being actively involved. Then I think there's also the of being able to experience the joy from them. I mean, instead of being frightened by them or confused by them or saying, "Oh my God," I mean, every now and again, I must confess, when I reached 50 events as of this morning with the yellow events. And the 50th, by the way, were the 3 cars driving back to the house in preparation for this podcast. 50. And those 3, I just counted as one event, you understand? Sometimes I say, enough. I got it. You can stop now, please. I have to not write down these yells for a while, universe. It's okay. How about if I talk about them on this, and I pass the buck? So now I've shared it with 2 of you, and other people at FLFE may hear this. And so now that it's not been wasted, it's not pearls to swine. If no one, there's a line from there was a musical. Broadway musical by Stephen Sondheim called Sunday in the Park with George, which is about a pointillist painter. There's a sidebar called George Surratt, who was, again, I'd never heard of him until I saw the Broadway musical. Anyway, he painted with 11 colored dots and never mixed them, so it was all dots. And there's a song which brought me to tears. And I saw it on Broadway probably 6 times and listened to the CD hundreds of times. There's a song called The Purple Hat, where and in this painting on the Olive Saint-Jacques or whatever it's called, you look at this painting and it's huge, and you're stepping back and you see a purple hat. But when you walk up closely to the hat, you see there's no purple, because he didn't have purple color. He had red dots and he had blue dots. Now, when you put the dots side by side, not mixing them, color mixing them, physically mixing them side by side, it's obvious that they're red and blue dots. But when you step back, the eye experiences as purple. And he talks about that the way he sees the world is that he sees a hat, then he enters the world of the hat. Then he sees the world through the eyes of the hat. And then he comes back out of the hat and paints the hat. Okay, and Sondheim was brilliant in the lyrics of this, but he has this line toward the tail end of this 2-act old Surratt and then great grandson Surratt, where the line is, "A vision's just a vision if it's only in your head. If no one gets to see it, it might as well be dead. It has to come to light." So part of the feeling that I have is that unless I share, in particular, like these yellow moments, for an audience and for people who might at least enjoy it, maybe find something new, but potentially can use this information, will see the connections, and maybe so that we're not wasting it. In this way, I've honored the synchronicities, and also maybe I'll get a break from saying, okay, no more yellow synchronicities for a couple of days until it's time for me to do the next level of yellow work, at which point, I'm all eyes and, all ears. So there is that sort of that quality to it. And also I'm utterly comfortable about living in the mystery. So even though I'm in awe and I'm in wonder, and I say I can't believe this is happening, and all those mind-bending, mind-numbing experiences, I'm comfortable saying it really happened. It's really important. I don't understand it right now, but I'm going to live with it. I'm going to celebrate it. I'm going to say, okay, maybe if I put the time into it, or maybe when the time is right, or whatever, that next step occurs. In the meantime, I get to experience the magic, this, just the joy of the, and I relish other people's synchronicities. I say almost as much as my own. And what I mean by almost as much is it's hard to experience somebody else's surprise, somebody else's awe, the level of meaning that something that somebody else can have. So, but I relish it vicariously for anyone else who has it. And I think that's also another reason, again, why I'm able to, to see them. I don't know if any of that's helpful or not.
Yeah, just the magic part. It's like another reason for synchronicities, right? It's celebrating the magic as well as celebrating the complexity of the universe and of creation. It's celebrating the magic when it happens. So how would you recommend somebody get started? Just we like to give some things people can do and try it at home. How would you recommend somebody get started with synchronicities, like today?
Man, what a great, no one has ever asked me that blunt a question before on this topic. But remember also, I've avoided talking about this topic for all these years. I only went public with the book and then did zero, advertising for it or, promotion of it. I feel inadequate, believe it or not, to say how to start. I can only share, my just being prepared for surprises and following the surprises, where they took me. That's quote how I started. What I would love to do, and you've just given me another gift. Another gift. At the tail end of the SPR presentation, and maybe we could do this through FLFE too. Maybe there's some FLFE people who would be interested in this. Even FLFE project. I don't know. I'm free associating now. When I gave this presentation to the SPR, Society of Psychic Research Community, I think it was the secretary of the organization. His name is Peter. He said, it might be interesting to start a synchronicity research group, because Gary, you mentioned that you can do these kinds of things online and you can have virtual groups and create a community. He said, maybe, SPR could create a community of people who wanted to do synchronicity research or explore synchronicities. And we could actually do a formal project related to the organization. And I said, gee, that's a wonderful idea. I'd be happy to, talk to you about it. And then this was again last week, and then he didn't get back to me, and he emailed me just last night. So I'm sorry I haven't gotten back to you. Things are very busy, he says, but I want you to know that we're actively thinking about this, and I have another colleague at the university who's also interested in synchronicity, and we'll be getting back to you. I don't know the feasibility or the wisdom of for example, in a company that's concerned with higher consciousness, the evolution of higher consciousness in general, and of course is providing a service for people that provides a whole host of benefits that people consistently report, as you know. But if part of the larger business plan is to nurture the evolution of higher consciousness and so on, that, maybe there's something that could be done in the area of synchronicity, where both data could be collected, but also training could be provided and people could, share this. If it's really should be part of higher consciousness work. And if it's one of those, wonderful side effects or benefits, it should be expounded upon and developed. And I'm now free associating Larry Dossey wrote a beautiful book
yes.
called One Mind, okay, where he covered all of this research. And he did so, bringing together this whole wealth of information from a diverse area, all speaking to the idea of one mind. Okay. And I think Larry Dossey deeply believes in the notion of a unitary, universal consciousness and a divinity and so on that plays out in many different areas in parapsychology and spirituality. You know the area that was left out of his book? Of all the phenomena that he covered the waterfront. The one exception was he didn't include synchronicity. It's not in his index. And he said, I forgot about that. Yeah, I guess that's relevant also. And yet it's some of the best evidence for divinity talking to us. It's somebody wrote a book called God Winks. I mean, that the language, Rhonda calls it the language of the divine, as you did independently. Mm-hmm. So maybe, people are listening to this podcast or something, maybe there's something maybe there are certain special things that could evolve, that would become opportunities that would serve the greater community and nurture the FLFE mission, as a business, as a public service, as a, and so on.
Yeah, let's ask the FLFE community to let us know if you're interested in learning more about synchronicities and joining us in a synchronicity group or experiment. And they can write into their contact at the office, or they can mention it on the Facebook page as well, and we'll take note. It would be.
Yeah, we have been exploring the idea of starting to do intention experiments, Gary, relative to Lynn McTaggart's work. And I know that you participated in that. So this is kind of, to me, there's starting to be a bridge formed here where there's something about the intent, because we've been planning to do it maybe later this is about March 2022. So I was thinking maybe this summer or fall, we would have a monthly meeting where with the community, where we would have breakout rooms, and we'd have an intention experiment running. And maybe this would be a nice kind of a bridge, intentions and synchronicity. So we'll talk more about that.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's something there.
Do we want to say, one more kind of wrap it up piece for each of us? That seems like we're winding down. Might be nice to see what else wants to be said.
Yes, I have a prayer, Gary, to assist myself and maybe others in creating a relationship with synchronicities that would maybe help their life. It just came to me when you were talking. So this will be my close up. So God, Creator, Divinity, please reveal your presence to me through synchronicities. Help me be aware of them. Help me see them clearly. And please repeat them as demonstrably as is needed, so that I cannot miss your message, so that I may be more in your grace. Amen.
Amen.
I came up with another 1,000 of 1,000 definition for synchronicities.
Oh, let's hear it.
I want to share it.
All right, well, we're still recording, so let's hear it.
Good.
Yeah, and then of course we have these 11 lessons of synchronicities, and I'm just like, if you put something in front of me, I want to go down the list. We may not want to do this, but there is these 11 lessons, which might be fun to do.
It would be fun to do as a separate podcast if you want.
Yeah, maybe we could do that. So so synchronicities. So synchronicities are the language of divine. Synchronicities are the language of the divine.
A language?
Yes, actually, synchronicities are the language of the divine, calibrates at 199 out of 1,000. Mm-hmm. Synchronicities are a language of the divine that is 1,000 of 1,000.
Wow, I love that.
Because the distinction is that if it's the language, it's the only one. And if it's a language, it's one of many. So there's probably a lot, but I came up with this other one about synchronicities. So synchronicities are a guiding light to confirm that a person is in alignment with divine will.
Ooh.
That's a good one.
Right. Which is kind of like it's kind of like what we've been talking about today. It's a bit of a synthesis, if you will, of the conversation. It just kind of. And then there's another one that was really similar.
Could you read that again, Clayton?
Sure.
Make sure I fully get that.
Synchronicities are a guiding light to confirm that a person is in alignment with divine will. So for me, if I'm thinking, okay, Lord, is this your will for me? Give me a sign. And all of a sudden I keep seeing yellow cars. Yellow cars. It's like, okay, well, that would be how I would interpret it being a sign. And then synchronicities are a guiding light to confirm that a decision can be in alignment with the highest and best interest of all. That was 1,000 of 1,000. If you say that it is absolutely in the highest and best interest of all, I think it goes to below 200. And what I see coming in there is the mind getting attached to that. It's looking for confirmation in a way that creates tension. I haven't really thought that through before. There seems to be, it's like when you're relaxed and open and you're just looking for the truth. My experience of synchronicities anyway is different than when there's a lot of tension. It's like, I need a sign and I need it soon. I need 4 answers. And I want, there's a tension about it. So that one I have to think about some more. The first one I like.
My hunch is that your audience would really like to hear the two of your opinions and experiences with synchronicity as opposed to hearing from the boring scientist. So we want to reverse roles someday.
Yeah, we'll see. That's I used to depend on synchronicities a lot to guide me. And when I got into muscle testing, I just chose
exactly. Yeah, you have an additional tool here that is waiting to be manifested and operationalized and validated and very and expressed to the world. All in good time. All in good time. Well, my closing could be brief, and then as our primary host, you can have the last word, I think. I think what I would like to do is first of all thank the two of you and also all the guidance you received for giving me the opportunity to share some of this with you. And in terms of my prayer, what I would just say is, Divinity, please listen to Clayton. And P.S., if this was not communicated in the spiritual manner it was invented, then I would say, God, then why did you give me the sense of humor in the first place? But I really meant it. Listen to Clayton, please. Amen.
It's hard to top those two. Yeah, I'm grateful to have you on with us, Gary. It's always, it just feeds my soul to have the three of us together and talking. There's always something that emerges, and it's a lot of fun and a lot of laughing. And that it seems to me that one of those characteristics of the golden light of divinity is humor. That there's got to be something funny about that golden light, because it's consistent in our experience with, messages that we hear, that humor, and maybe that's part of the synchronicity search, is the humor of it. It's like, here's your answer, is right in front of your face. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for joining this episode of Fields of Consciousness, the podcast of consciousness conversations. We invite you to visit the link below the episode to experience a completely free trial of focused life force energy for 15 days.
If you like, you can subscribe to the Fields of Consciousness podcast and tune in next time. We release new episodes every other week on Tuesdays at 11:11 a.m. PST. Onward and upward.